Hey everyone, this is Beardo, and I've got a stack and a half for you today. I got 7 books. I've ordered them from least favorite to most favorite, and I gotta tell you, it was a really mixed bag this week. I had kind of a frustrating day. I went to the comic book shop on my bike, and it's about probably 11 miles from where I live to the comic book shop that I shop at. Got to the shop, got my books, got outside, and saw that I had a flat tire, which was a bummer because there was no bike shop anywhere in the vicinity. So I ended up waiting for my girlfriend to get off work, and while I was waiting, I sat down and I read my books. And unfortunately, there were enough in there, and unfortunately I also read them in the wrong order. I read some of the good ones first, but then there were a lot of stinkers that followed those. And so I was just kind of in a bad mood all afternoon. So I'm going to be as positive as I can. I apologize. I don't like negative reviews. I like to be as positive as possible. But some of these really, I'm probably going to tear into a little bit. So just fair warning. Please bear with me, and I hope you like these reviews anyway. I'm actually going to do these in 2 parts. I'm going to get sort of the nastier stuff out of the way first, and that'll be this video. So if you don't want to see me ranting, I wouldn't blame you if you stop this video now and wait for the next video to upload. The next video is going to be sort of my cream of the crop, the ones that I really enjoyed. So those will be coming up. However, in the meantime, I'm going to give you the ones that didn't really do it for me today. Okay, so I've ordered them from least favorite to most favorite, but all 3 of these are pretty... They didn't work for me, but each one for different reasons. So, we're going to kick it off with sort of the least offensively bad one, but in some ways that's, for me, the worst one. Like, if it's really bad in a way that annoys me and I have something to say about it, that's in some ways better than a book that I just don't really have anything to say about. It just wasn't good, because at least the other 2, or the other ones, you know, get me thinking, rather than this particular one, which... I just don't have anything to say. I can just say I didn't like it. And that was John Byrne's Trio Issue 2. So, I had high hopes for this. It had pretty mixed reviews in the first issue round, and I still enjoyed it. It had a good sort of retro feel, definitely blast from the past, enjoyed John Byrne's artwork, enjoyed the concept of the new characters, thought it might be kind of fun. I was hoping for a little more character development in this issue, and instead we just kind of get the exact same beats we got in issue 1, just with an issue 2 on it, and some slightly different villains. So as a result, Trio issue 2 just didn't really do it for me. And again, there wasn't any one thing that really stuck out to me as far as like why I didn't like it, as other than the fact that it just kind of was boring and got redundant, and overall just kind of left me feeling kind of stale and empty. You can see the whole background in here is empty. John Byrne is kind of infamous for having empty backgrounds, and you can tell deadlines are definitely starting to loom for John Byrne because there is a lot of empty space in this book, and frankly there's a lot of empty space in the characters and empty space in the plot. So all in all, I was pretty disappointed. I will probably be dropping this. I might pick up issue 3 just to give it one more chance, but all in all, I'm guessing Trio won't be on my next month's poll. Alright, next up, a title that definitely shouldn't be on next month's poll, but I admit that I said that last month, and yet here I am with another one. It is Superman in Action Comics, issue number 10. Now, the reason why I broke down and got this is we've got Rags Morales on art again, and his art really is beautiful in this book. I know some people have had kind of mixed feelings about it. It's not the Rags Morales who did Identity Crisis. This is a little bit more cartoony. It's a little bit more rushed and sketchy kind of looking. Which isn't to say that it's sketchy, but it just, comparatively to something like Identity Crisis, is a little sketchy. But the thing that really makes it great for me is it really reminds me of those old Superman, you know, by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster books. They really have an air about their illustration, and you can tell that it was rushed, but it does have a very cohesive charm to it. And I think that Action Comics, when Rags Morales is doing it, has a similar kind of chemistry. So I do really like the art in this, and I wanted to get it for that. Story-wise, it actually started really promising. It starts with Nimrod the Hunter, and he is going to hunt down Superman because he, it's the most dangerous game kind of a thing where, he's hunted everything, and now he's going to hunt, the one thing that he probably can't kill because he wants to kill it. That whole deal. Clear motivation from the villain, clear sense of story from the get-go. That worked out. Now, meanwhile, Clark has just printed a story about a little girl who's been killed, and he knows who killed her. And so he changes into his Superman costume to go confront that villain. And so you kind of get this sense that, the Hunter's on his tail while he's being Superman doing his thing, and then the Hunter's going to come in, and we're going to have, the story unfold that way. Instead, we get Superman who stops the villain and then finds that the villain has some pet rats. And what's the next most logical thing to have happen in the story but for Superman to take the pet rats in and take them to the Justice League and ask for the Justice League's help taking care of these rats? What? This book was just a hodgepodge of stuff. He goes to the Justice League, and you get sort of that very Jeff Johns-y Justice League where everyone's kind of wishy-washy, and it's just sort of a cartoony version of all the characters. And again, not really furthering the story of Nimrod the Hunter. And then we cut to Clark Kent hanging out with Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen. And they have their little thing. And then at the very end, and spoilers here, at the very end, a man comes to the Daily Star with bombs attached to his belt. And Clark gets in the middle of it, and he blows up with the man. And, of course, since he's not dressed as Superman, everyone thinks that Clark Kent is dead. And so, basically, at the end of this issue, Clark Kent's identity is basically ruined, and he's going to have to come up with a new one. Of course, then Nimrod, who sort of dovetails into the beginning and the ending very nicely, but really has not a whole lot to do with the story at large, shows up at Clark's apartment, finds out that he's dead, and thinks, how could that possibly be? I thought he was Superman. And then Superman shows up and beats him up in a panel or two, and the story wraps up, basically. So Nimrod, who is sort of the drive you expect from the cover and from the beginning of the story to be kind of the driving force of the story, basically shows up at the beginning, shows up at the end, and not much else happens. So again, this book was just meandering. What's worse is we kind of have, kind of like in the last issue of The Flash, where we're introducing a lot of different characters and not really paying any of them off. So we get, in addition to Nimrod being in here, we get at least 2 to 3 other bad guys introduced in this, only one of which plays out, and that's sort of the nasty guy that Clark is hunting at the beginning. We also get introduced to a couple other supervillains that show up and go away, and show up and go away. And so it's just kind of like, this book is all set up, and there's no through story. The classic idea of comic book storytelling is you have an A story, you have a B story, sometimes you have a C story. And the A story should take up 3/4 of the book. The B story, which is going to become the A story in a few issues, should get a page or two. And then if there's a C story coming up down the line, that maybe gets a couple of panels. In this book, you're getting the A story, the B story, the C story, and the D story all getting equal time. And as a result, this book just kind of goes in circles, like the circles you see on the cover. So all in all, Action Comics was definitely not a pickup this week. Hasn't been a pickup for a while, and yet here I am picking it up. So, here's my challenge to you all. If I'm still getting this by the time DC hits the 0 issues, which is coming up in September, you have my permission to do a video response to my video in which I review the 0 issue, assuming I'm still getting it, and taunt me mercilessly. And you should just lay into me and be like, you're an idiot, what are you doing, and whatever you want to say. Get it all out there. and there will be a prize to someone in that list of videos. Of course, this contest is all on the stipulation that I'm still getting Action Comics at that point. So, when Action Comics 0 rolls around and I'm still getting this, expect that contest and I will announce it. I swear to God I will, because I've got an addiction, guys, and I've got to stop it. Alright, enough about Action Comics. Finally, least bad of the bad books that I got this week, but nevertheless was a bad title, was one that I had no intention of picking up, but I decided to give it a shot because I knew, first of all, I wanted to know what the fuss was about. I know you guys are probably going to be talking about it, and also because of all the miniseries, and yes, this is Before Watchmen, of all the miniseries that they are putting out, the Minutemen are the only ones that didn't get sort of their own issue of Watchmen. You know, the comedian had his whole backstory laid out in one very complete issue of Watchmen. Night Owl, same thing. Rorschach, same thing. The Minutemen, while in and out throughout the series, never got, you know, a deep, full-on story told about them. So I figured out of all those miniseries, the one that really might have something fresh and something new would be Minutemen. Plus, of course, I like Darwin Cook. So all of those things kind of combined led me to get Minutemen. Number 1. And there's a 10% chance I'll be getting issue 2. So the reason this book is better than Action is because it has a cohesive storyline being set up. It's better than Trio because it's less derivative. However, it is actually very derivative. I'll talk about that shortly. And the art is better. However, other than that, Minutemen is a pretty disappointing issue for me, and I do actually have quite a bit to say about it. First of all, we're going to talk about aesthetically, because that's sort of the best part. Darwin Cook has good art in it. It's, you know, your typical Darwin Cook stuff. However, it definitely plays with a more monochromatic look, as you can see from the cover. It definitely uses a lot of muted colors and a lot of, you know, not primary colors, which is, of course, you know, one of the, you know, part of the mission statement of the original Watchmen was not to use primary colors. However, there is a way you can do that is still sort of artistically pleasing, and I felt like this book actually, and you guys might really be upset at me for saying this, I don't know, because I mean, I know there's a lot of big Darwin Cook fans out there, but while, I mean, his actual illustrations look good, but honestly, the coloring on this book, for me, made it actually kind of unpleasant to look at. And I don't mean that in a, you know, artistically daring unpleasant kind of a way. I meant it as in, it was just kind of ugly. I didn't like it. Again, I mean, that's to each his own. I can see you guys kind of rolling your eyes at that statement, maybe. I'm sorry, but I just didn't feel like it was artistically satisfying. And again, I have no problem with, you know, non-primary colors. I have no problem making it dark and gritty or whatever you want to do. It just still should in some way be pleasing to the eye. And this just wasn't for me, and I don't really quite know why. It was just a little too muted and a little too sort of fuddled. You know, I didn't feel like it had the coloring had a clear direction other than not to be primary colors. Let me know what you thought about that, because that's kind of a random thing to say, but there you go. And that was kind of the best part of the book. The big problem I had with this book is you're getting an introduction to all the different Minutemen. Now, this is something that is important when you're starting off a miniseries, obviously, to introduce your cast of characters. Of course, I don't know who in the world would be reading Before Watchmen that hasn't read actual Watchmen, so theoretically you're going to know who these characters are anyway, but, you know, it's arguable whether or not you need this issue. The big problem is absolutely nothing else happens in this. It is just introduction of characters that we already know and introducing them in ways that we're pretty familiar with for the most part. There are a couple small exceptions, but generally it's very much, you know, par for the course. Everything that Alan Moore has explained to you is just sort of fleshed out in a completely, you know, non-extracurricular way in Minutemen #1. You know, nothing new is in this book. And again, you know, it's okay to introduce that stuff, and I understand where it's going to have a slow start, because you do have to be new reader friendly. But it's not just the fact that they're doing it that way, it's the way Darwyn Cooke approaches it. The whole thing is narrated by Hollis Mason, and it's all coming from him at a time when he's writing Under the Hood. Now, we get excerpts of Under the Hood in the original Watchmen. We know how Hollis Mason kind of sees the other Minutemen and how he he sort of saw this time in his life. And so having this book be narrated by him under those exact same circumstances gives absolutely no new elements to this book. Again, it's just exactly what Alan Moore did, except with new pictures. And that bothered me a lot. I needed to see something a little different. I needed to see something extra. This is really just, a $3.99 toll booth stop on the road of reading comics. You know what I mean? It was definitely, so far anyway, is definitely a DC cash-in. Now, that said, I admit, we don't really know what's going on in this story yet, and we are going to see something coming up in the next issue here, which is why there is a 10% chance that I will pick up issue number 2. But that said, I'm sorry, but you had to sell me on issue 1. This is a series that I'm skeptical enough of that if the first issue wasn't at least moderately good, I'm really going to have a hard time jumping on board. I'm curious to know what you guys thought of this. I've seen that you guys have been posting, but I haven't really watched anything yet. But all in all, I'm sorry. I have to weigh in on the disappointed side. In a Minutemen book, for me, like what I want to see out of this book, if I were writing it, is I want to see all the characters right away, all together. Let's get them as a team and just assume that people know who they are. And pick up, the necessary information along the way. Because there is a way to tell a story in which you get the information as you go. You don't have to have, all the exposition thrown at you at the beginning and then start the story in a later issue. That's just not necessary, and it's not really good storytelling. The other thing I want to see is just these being basically, kind of circus freaks. They're just kind of guys in costumes, and I want to see them just kind of sitting around, eating takeout Chinese and talking about what they're going to do to fight crime and having no idea how to go about it. You know what I mean? This book could be funny. I would be fine if this book had some humor in it. It doesn't have to have the same tone as Watchmen. It can be its own thing, and it should be its own thing. And I just want to see ordinary people trying their hand at fighting crime and having no idea how to approach it, and very little crime being fought. I just want it to be about the people and about them, situations with the press more than situations with any kind of supervillains. And I definitely don't want to see any superheroics. And already, halfway through issue 1, we've got people flying off rooftops and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. That's just not really part of the Watchmen universe. These are supposed to be ordinary people living basically ordinary lives, except that they dress up. These guys have more in common with people who go to Comic-Con than they do with Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. And that's what I want to see out of this book. I want to see people who are, who should have been at Comic-Con, but there wasn't one in 1940. And so instead, they formed the Minutemen. That's more what I want to see. And obviously, that vision of this has a lot of explaining to do to tie in with the whole Watchmen thing. But keep in mind, too, that, we only know the Minutemen really from Hollis Mason's viewpoint. So, well, that's not entirely true, but primarily from Hollis Mason's viewpoint. So, he has his own spin on things, and if you're going to show them the way it really was, you really have a lot of license there. There's a lot of unexplored opportunity with the Minutemen. That's why I picked this one up in the first place. And unfortunately, Minutemen number 1 just didn't deliver. Not for me, not really on virtually any level, other than I do like Darwyn Cooke's artwork, but again, I don't like the coloring, so it's still not a very pretty book to look at. And, okay, I'm going to take a deep breath here, guys. Negativity out of my system. I've got 4 more books to review for you, and they will be in the next video, which we'll be posting shortly after this one. and I'm excited to share with you what I got, because I got some great stuff. And I want to share that with you because comics are better than these 3 books. And let's have some comic book fun, right? So I'll be back in a little bit with another video, and we'll get things off on a little higher note. Again, sorry, I'm a little negative here. It's been a rough day. So anyway, I'll talk to you all very, very soon. Please subscribe above if you haven't. Comment below, thumb up, all that kind of stuff. And feel free to send me a comment and tell me to be less negative, because I don't disagree. So anyway, I will be back shortly.